Running backs can single-handedly win you a championship in fantasy football, but you spend premium draft capital on the wrong one and they can destroy your season before it's even got out the gates. We're going to walk you through some running backs that you should not be touching at their current costs in ADP. We're going to start at the top, Tom. Josh Jacobs, the running back 12. Okay, he's a 5th-round pick on Underdog, but on other platforms, you're talking early 3rd-round pick. On Sleeper, he's going 26th overall. This is a guy that has shown some flashes, but I'm yet to truly be convinced that he can be a true 3-down workhorse. Do you think that Josh Jacobs could pay off his current price?
I think he definitely could, but if that happens, we're probably a little reliant on Marshawn Lloyd's hamstring issues lingering into the season and then him never really getting past them. AJ Dillon, neither of us are big fans of him. I think he could easily end up cut. There's the only reason to keep AJ Dillon on the roster is if Marshawn Lloyd isn't fully healthy. Like, they gave him a really small amount of guaranteed money. And the Josh Jacobs contract definitely does look a bit fluffy on the surface. You know, there's not much guaranteed money year to year in it, but that's kind of how the Packers like to do business in general. So maybe we can't read into that as much as we like. But when you look at Josh Jacobs across the course of his career, there was the one massive outlier year. And then everything else, it's just kind of like more volume over talent at times. Like, if you took away 5 rush attempts per game, his output would really drop. Like, last year, he had 2.35 yards after contact per attempt, which was a career low for him. PFF gave him a career low in run grade. He only forced 28 missed tackles forced through the season last year. That was about 1 in every 10 attempts he managed to get one, which is kind of just about okay, but definitely not good. So I just think Jacobs needs everything to break right for him to get the kind of fantasy returns that we'd expect for a top 26 pick, particularly in redraft. On Underdog, DraftKings, best ball platforms, I don't mind mixing him in a little bit when he falls. I do have maybe 5% Josh Jacobs across a couple of hundred teams, and that feels fine. But in redraft, I just don't believe he can be the kind of hero running back that I want in the first couple of rounds.
Absolutely. And I think part of the problem is people are projecting this Packers offense to do similar numbers to what they did last year. I think this Packers offense is going to adjust and change massively in Jordan Love's second year as a starter. We saw last year they were 0.2% pass rate over expected. Like, they were one of the most balanced offenses in the league. Jordan Love is now moving out of that kind of first season. He is now an established star quarterback. This wide receiver room is loaded. There are 4 good wide receivers. There are 2 good tight ends. I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers could potentially be 3, 4, maybe even 5% pass rate over expected. And that's going to significantly reduce the volume for Josh Jacobs. We know, Josh Jacobs has had some competent receiving seasons, but it's more like check downs and dump offs. He's not a receiving back. He's not going to get out in space. He's not going to break down the linebacker and create separation. He's going to feast on checkdowns. Well, Jordan Love doesn't check the ball down a huge amount because Jordan Love is athletic and can take off and doesn't need those checkdowns. So if we're removing that receiving work and we're saying the rushing volume's not going to be there, certainly nowhere near the volume he saw in 2022, I can't get on board with running back 12 overall prices. That feels absolutely extreme for me. So yeah, I'm happy to avoid Josh Jacobs. If you are here though and you've not hit that subscribe button, we're ever so close to 3,000. Do us a solid, help us get there right now. Hit that subscribe and you will not regret it. In Chicago, DeAndre Swift, he's on his 3rd team already. Running back 25 overall. Look, DeAndre Swift is incredibly divisive. There are some people that love the talent, think he's phenomenal in space, and think he's going to be part of a high-powered offense. There are some people that just think he's a bit of a jag that can't run the ball between tackles. Tom, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, so DeAndre Swift, I mean, we've had so many great guests come on to the Fantasy Sanctuary this year, and people can go and check out our other videos with the likes of Dwayne McFarlane, guys like Ian Hartitz, who think there's still some light for DeAndre Swift. But then you can go and look at other videos with plenty of smart people who just do not see DeAndre Swift when he's on the draft board. For those people, they're seeing guys like Jalen Warren around that range, Ramondre Stevenson, even Najee Harris as better bets. Because DeAndre Swift, as you said, is on his third team in a short spell of time. It's like third team in 3 years. It feels like the Eagles could have kept hold of DeAndre Swift if they were willing to pay a running back, but they wanted Saquon Barkley, who's older, who hasn't shown huge amounts of juice in the receiving game lately. But part of what they might be thinking they can get from Saquon Barkley is a player who's better at scoring touchdowns. DeAndre Swift rarely gets the goal line work. You look back at last year with the Eagles, and they would mix in the other running backs. They'd mix in Jalen Hurts, obviously. You go back to his time in Detroit, where he really didn't have the faith of the coaching staff. So even though he's coming off career highs in receptions, yards per game, and probably most importantly, the amount of games played, I don't really have a lot of faith in DeAndre Swift becoming this great fantasy option this year, because I like Roschon Johnson. I like Khalil Herbert. We've seen Khalil Herbert mixing in preseason. We saw Roschon Johnson mixing in the previous week. We know that Roschon Johnson was drafted by this team. They're not probably going to give up on him just yet. Everybody seems to want Khalil Herbert to get cut and end up on a team like the Cowboys or the Chargers. But teams don't tend to cut good players, and they don't need to cut those players. I think it's more important to them to surround Caleb Williams with good options. And that was what they did when they went and got DeAndre Swift. They had plenty of cash to burn, so they didn't mind paying decent running back money to get DeAndre Swift as soon as free agency opened. But I don't have any faith in this suddenly becoming a situation where DeAndre Swift is scoring 15 touchdowns and getting himself to a Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. People keep talking about the contract that the Bears signed DeAndre Swift to as a reason to buy into him. Look, the Bears had an insane volume of resources and wanted to do everything they could to build around Caleb Williams as a rookie. They
also had to spend to a certain amount, because otherwise it would have been under the minimum cap spend average over the course of a couple of years. Like, not a lot of people spend much time talking about that, but you have to spend to a certain level of the cap, and the Bears have been way below it because they gutted this roster, so they had to go out there and spend some money, so they were okay with overpaying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only players that are available in free agency last year are running backs. They've gone and acquired DJ Moore in the trade. They've gone and acquired Keenan Allen in the trade. They were able to spend a top 10 pick on Rome Odunze. You can't go out and find star wide receivers, star offensive linemen in free agency. So, right, we want to add playmakers. We want to add potential weapons around our franchise quarterback. The only players you can go and do that with are running backs. So, yeah, why not throw some money at DeAndre Swift? There is talent. I believe DeAndre Swift is a talented back. He's phenomenal in space. But I just look at this and say, in what scenario is DeAndre Swift the best running back to be on the field for the Bears? Is he the best at grinding out the hard yards, running between the tackles? No, Khalil Herbert is a better running back than he is. Is he the best in pass protection? No, Roschon Johnson is a phenomenal pass protector and he's better than DeAndre Swift. Is DeAndre Swift the best option for the underneath routes, those checkdowns, those angle routes out the backfield? Maybe. But if you're the Bears, are you really wanting to be targeting DeAndre Swift out the backfield when instead you could be targeting DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, or Rome Odunze downfield? I think we saw in the first preseason game, DeAndre Swift took a screen pass 40 yards. That's what he can do. Absolutely. But if you're banking on that week in, week out for fantasy production, I'm really concerned that I just can't get there. And let's not forget, DeAndre Swift has missed time every single season in his career and hasn't shown that he can stay healthy for an entire season. So I just can't get on board with the price. And I think for me, unless his price suddenly plummets, I'm avoiding him at all costs.
Yeah, and it's kind of poetic that DeAndre Swift did what DeAndre Swift does. When he got to the red zone, he immediately fell down. DeAndre Swift is not a guy who finds his way into the end zone with any kind of reliability. And all the stats which we can point to from how well he played with the Eagles, that was a really excellent offensive line that he played behind. I think the Bears' offensive line is going to be better this year than it was previously, but there's still a long way to go for it to really make players look much better than they are.
Volume is king at the running back position. We know that. You can bank on it. It's what can win you a league. But talent is so important. And for me, Rachaad White last year, he got insane amounts of volume. He had a fantastic fantasy season, but I'm not sure how much value he was actually adding rather than just the putting up numbers because of the pure volume. He's currently going as the RB15. You can see he's a 39th overall pick on Sleeper. Tom, I know you're not the biggest Rachaad White fan, but is there any world where you can see yourself drafting him in the fourth round of drafts?
So I don't like. I've really liked Rachaad White over the last couple of years at times because his price has always been quite palatable for what you're expecting out of him. We know that he's woefully inefficient, but now we have to kind of weigh things up. Last year, he had the sixth highest opportunity share among running backs. He had 72% opportunity share, which is massive. But he was woefully inefficient on it. He had 3.6 yards per carry. Part of that was the offensive line wasn't particularly good. You know, they had, was it Ryan Jensen, who had to retire immediately before the season due to a gruesome knee injury. And they do seem to have made some strides in upgrading the interior offensive line. But this is a player who was third bottom in rushing EPA, 37th in rush yards after contact, 30th in rush yards before contact, 29th in big runs. So even when he got loose, he wasn't turning it into massive plays. He only had 4 games over 80 rushing yards last year. Bucky Irving is just the kind of decent complement to this backfield. And I don't think that Rachaad White has any kind of leeway that if Bucky Irving starts eating into Rachaad's work a tiny bit, taking more than, and it knocks him down to, say, a 60% opportunity share or a 55% opportunity share, that'll be disastrous for Rachaad White's fantasy value, and he'll become even more reliant on catching checkdowns.
Yeah, I really like the Bucky Irving edition. I think I've been on record as saying I think if Bucky Irving had run a different 40-yard dash, I think he would have been a day 2 pick. Like, I think Bucky Irving is a very good back. I think he's a competent complement to Rachaad White. And I think there is a world where he could easily into some of the higher value touches in the passing game, in the screen game that Rachaad White has, buoyed his fantasy production over the past few years. But I also think that there's a world, maybe I'm a bit of a Bucks hater, but there's a world where the Bucks could disappoint this year. They threaded the needle last year. They played high variance on defense. Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans seemed to have that magic connection last year, but it was very risky. There were plenty of opportunities where it could have gone the other way. And the Bucks have basically said, let's just bring everybody back and we'll go for it again. And that always concerns me in the NFL because I think if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And there is a world where Baker Mayfield doesn't have the lucky, efficient season that he had last year with Dave Canales. Mike Evans starts to show signs of age. If this offense starts to regress slightly, suddenly Rachaad White isn't seeing so many touches in and around the red zone, suddenly isn't seeing the raw volume of rushing attempts. And he could just be a volume-based RB2 that you've had to pay fringe RB1 prices to acquire. So for me, I don't believe he is a supremely talented back. And at this sort of price, I need to see the talent. I can't just say he's going to get 15 to 20 touches a game and that's the reason I'm going to draft him there. If you haven't yet got yourself entry into our summer giveaway, what are you doing? Leave a comment below. Every single comment you leave on any of our videos gets you an entry to our summer draw. We're giving away $100 in cold hard cash, a $25 voucher to our merchandise store, and of course, 12 months free premium content. All you got to do is hit a comment and it gets you that entry. Javonte Williams, it feels like he is one of the most talked about players in all of fantasy. The talent is clear. The injuries have destroyed his career to date, but we're now at a point where he's going as an RB3 in draft. He's going around 100 picks in whatever platform you are drafting on. Tom, do you believe there's a world where Javonte Williams could pay off his price? Or do you think not being a Sean Payton guy with so many mouths to feed in this backfield, it could be that he's just an expensive roster clogger?
I think I'm really struggling with Javonte Williams this year. I was in, it's hokey cokey in my way through the offseason on Javonte Williams. But when you struggle that much with a player, sometimes you're wrong and you have to adjust. And sometimes you just have to read the writing on the wall that perhaps all the different reasons that you can't decide on them are what are going to make it really difficult for Javonte Williams to succeed this year. Yes, when you're talking about a player going in the range of around pick 100, the opportunity cost of taking them, it's pretty low. Like, we could take Javonte Williams in redraft leagues, and if it's not working out, if it's a three-way, four-way committee, then you can cut him, you can move on from him, or you can see if you can package a trade with him. In redraft, again, the opportunity cost is so much lower. But where I struggle is stuff you mentioned, like Sean Payton has his guys. If you don't believe me, like, go and look at the number of ex-New Orleans Saints on the Broncos rosters. Guys like Adam Troutman, guys like Will Lutz have been there. These guys,
Little Jordan Humphrey still floating around.
Little Jordan Humphrey. I mean, like, it is crazy the amount of people that Sean Payton brings along with him, and all power to him. Great that people have jobs, but he brought in Audric Estime. He brought in Jaleel McLaughlin. I know he brought in, was it Blake Watson, the undrafted rookie who you're really high on, and Samaje Perine. It hasn't worked out for him, but he was the first player who Sean Payton signed in free agency last year. Javonte Williams is not somebody that Sean Payton brought in. Javonte Williams ranked 17th in average touches per game last year, but rarely ever hit a point like they seem to be really worried about pushing him too much on volume. And because of that, because he was doing okay in touches, but it was an inefficient offense with Russell Wilson at quarterback, it wasn't enough to turn into good value, because from week 4, Jaleel McLaughlin was also averaging 7.3 touches per game. So he was splitting touches. He was losing a good chunk of the work. The offense wasn't overly good. And I don't think the offense is going to be overly good this year. I think Sean Payton has a real chance here to either prove everyone wrong, or in a year's time, people are going to be looking at this situation and saying, the magic just isn't there with Sean Payton. Maybe it was Drew Brees all along.
Yeah, I think if Javonte Williams was on an offense with 31 other offensive play callers / NFL head coaches, I'd probably be a little bit more confident in him. But Sean Payton has shown us time and time again, if you're not a Sean Payton guy, it doesn't matter what you do, he hasn't got time for you. And you've nailed it perfectly. Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine, Blake Watson, Audric Estime, those are Sean Payton guys, and Javonte Williams isn't. I still, and I've said it before, I still think that Javonte Williams is, for me, the prime candidate to get traded this offseason before the season starts to somebody like the Cowboys or a team looking for a back to add in. I think that this offense, it works perfectly. Samaje Perine is one of the best pass blocking backs in the league. Jaleel McLaughlin is electric. He is great in space. He's going to be utilized in the passing game. And Audric Estime is your between the 20s, short yardage, between the tackles bruiser. That is a perfect Sean Payton backfield. Javonte Williams feels like the odd man out. And I just can't get on board with a guy where we're talking about 4 or 5 potential options in this backfield that could see competent touches on a bad offense. You know, let's not forget, this is going to be a Bo Nix-led offense. Bo Nix was the 5th or 6th quarterback drafted in this year's draft.
And massively overdrafted. Like,
absolutely.
the Broncos took him because they didn't have a second-round pick and they couldn't find a trade partner to trade back. So they overdrafted him way above where anyone expected it to go. And also, the Broncos have the 8th toughest strength of schedule according to Sharp Football. It's not going to be an easy ride for him at all.
Absolutely. And Bo Nix is a check down Charlie. This isn't a guy that's going to be pushing the ball downfield, making defenses play 2 high safeties to free up space in the box to run the ball. He's going to be all that short and underneath stuff. And there's going to be a high volume of targets, but it's going to be to the wide receivers, to the tight ends, not to the running backs. And it's not going to create space in the box for the running backs to move the ball. So, I just think for me, Javonte Williams, a guy I am absolutely not touching. The next guy, though, Alvin Kamara. Obviously, he was suspended to start the season last year, and then he had one of the most insane second halves of the year I have ever seen. The volume of targets that he saw is absolutely mind-blowing. He did nothing with them. He was completely inefficient. He looked terrible, but he was an absolute PPR scam. Tom, do you think there is a world where Alvin Kamara could repeat yet again, just getting there on targets and PPR-ness once more?
There's definitely a world where it could happen, but it's not a world where I want to pay top 55 prices for Alvin Kamara, and that's where he's going on Sleeper. On Yahoo, he's going at pick 50. On ESPN, he's going around pick 45. Like, that's too expensive for a player who is basically just, yeah, it's the James White role. It's like all you're doing is catching passes. Much as we love James White, and much as we've loved what Alvin Kamara has given us over the year, he was the RB6 in half PPR last year, led the position with 75 catches despite that suspension. But he was 20th in rush attempts per game at 13.8. It was his lowest rushing yards per game since his rookie season, career low in yards per reception and yards after the catch. So Alvin Kamara really outperformed expectations massively by catching all those balls. But there seems to be a steady drumbeat that Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator in New Orleans, is going to make this offense more interesting in general. So maybe that means less checkdowns from Derek Carr. Maybe the fact that Jamal Williams is healthy this year going into the season means that he's more involved around the goal line. Taysom Hill is always going to be mixing in for those packages. And then maybe, just maybe, Kendre Miller actually becomes a contributor at some point. So there's just too many points for me to be willing to give up a top 60 pick for a running back with this profile at this point in their career.
I am seriously concerned that this Saints season could just completely blow up and implode. I think that the offensive line is what you build your offense around. And Ryan Ramczyk retiring due to injury has thrown this offense into complete disrepair. Trevor Penning has been one of the worst NFL tackles since he was drafted. And they're having to start him at right tackle because they've got no other options. They're throwing in a raw rookie at left tackle. The interior of the offensive line has been porous for the last 3 years, yet they seem to just keep throwing money at below average options. I just think that this Saints team, we talk about them kicking the can down the road year after year after year, and at some point that bill is going to come due, and I do wonder if this is the year. I wouldn't be surprised if it completely imploded. The offensive terrible. I think Derek Carr is a fantastic quarterback if you can keep him safe in the pocket with time to throw. The problem is that where he separates from someone like Jared Goff is comfortable sitting in the pocket and taking a hit. Derek Carr sees a free rusher or gets pressure and absolutely falls apart. And that's part of the reason why Alvin Kamara saw so many targets last year, because Derek Carr wasn't able to push the ball down the field. Well, at some point, if the book's out on Derek Carr, we can pressure him and he's not going to push the ball down the field. Well, what a team's going to do? They're going to pressure him and sit on the underneath stuff. And at some point, I just think that this Saints offense could not get out of its own way. And I don't want any parts of that. When you're telling me I've got to pay RB17 prices to go and get Alvin Kamara, no, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we can't stress enough how much Dennis Allen, the head coach, could easily be the first head coach to lose their job this year. Dennis Allen has been woefully inadequate since he took over from Sean Payton. Replacing the offensive coordinator felt like the last roll of the dice for him. Everything that comes out doesn't make you think that the players particularly like them. We go back to the last play of the 2023 season when instead of kneeling out the game, they gave the ball to Jamal Williams to score a touchdown against the Falcons, who were already beat. They went against what Dennis Allen wanted. Like, they don't respect him. And he has nothing nice to say about any of the players. I don't think they're going to play hard for him. And yeah, I think that the Saints completely collapsing is absolutely in the range of outcomes.
One of my best calls I had all of last year,
you nailed it.
Ekeler was not going to be a top 12 running back. He didn't. We've now seen him move teams. He's with the Washington franchise. He is still going far too high in drafts. He's a top 100 pick. You and I are massive fans of Brian Robinson and think that he could be the cheat code in drafts this year. Is there any world where you can get on board with drafting Austin Ekeler at his price, or are we just talking about name value and that's the only reason why he's going where he's going?
I've drafted over 200 best ball teams so far this offseason. There is one player in the top 120 who I've taken 0 times, and it is Austin Ekeler. And part of that is because I'm very high on Brian Robinson. He is my most drafted running back currently. But Austin Ekeler is coming off a career low PFF grade of 60.2. Massive drop from his career average of 79.6. He also saw his missed tackles forced per game drop from 4.2 in 2022 to 2.9 last year, set a career low in yards after contact per attempt. That number's dropped for 6 straight seasons for him. If the argument in favor of Austin Ekeler is that he can get the high value touches, well, but in terms of being a pass catcher, he posted career lows in yards per route run last year and elusive rating. And okay, yes, he was dealing with injuries, but I don't think that we have to give him a complete pass there, because Jaden Daniels as a dual threat quarterback isn't going to check down the ball at a huge rate, particularly when he knows that even if he gave Austin Ekeler a 10-yard head start, he could probably catch him pretty quickly. So why throw the ball to Austin Ekeler when he can keep his eyes downfield and just get going? If you think that Austin Ekeler is going to get all the goal line work, then I would point to the fact that Anthony Lynn is the running back coach of the Commanders. He was the Chargers head coach between 2017 and 2020, and Austin Ekeler only finished above RB20 once there. It was after Anthony Lynn left that Austin Ekeler really hit his stride and really started to get the vast majority of the goal line work and really become a nuclear option for fantasy. Austin Ekeler has PPR scammed his way and touchdown scammed his way to being a top running back, and it's been beautiful to see at times. But Ryan was on the wall last year. I didn't want to be in on Austin Ekeler. I ping-ponged on it, and I should have listened to you, but there is no way that I'm going to draft Austin Ekeler, even if I draft 1,000 teams this offseason.
I just don't get what you're hoping for. We're going to see fewer goal line carries because I think Brian Robinson is competent in around the goal line. It's not like they're just going to give all that work to Austin Ekeler. Plus, as we saw in the first preseason game against the Jets, Jaden Daniels is going to get used in around the goal line. This offensive line is abysmal. They didn't really do anything in the offseason to address it. They are starting a third-round rookie at left tackle. There's serious question marks there. And then the checkdowns. Okay, he might get used in that, but Brian Robinson isn't a complete nothing in the receiving game. Jaden Daniels isn't a player that's going to check the ball down a huge amount. Last year, Jaden Daniels attempted almost 300 passes. He attempted 3 passes behind the line of scrimmage outside the hashes. This is not a guy that's checking the ball down to a running back when there's no options. He is going, can I throw it deep? What's my first read? Can I throw it deep? If not, I'm taking off. The reason quarterbacks check the ball down is because they are feeling pressure and they need to get rid of the ball. Jaden Daniels, 50% of pressured snaps last year, he took off and scrambled. He was sacked on 23% of pressured snaps last year. So we've got 27% of pressured snaps where he attempted a pass. That is a minuscule percentage. I don't think that there is enough at all to warrant drafting Austin Ekeler anywhere. And yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I'm happy not drafting him at all this year.
Yeah, and the last point I'd just make on this is that Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, has a history of running hurry-up offenses, so the offense that's on the field tends to stay on the field more often than not, and I think that's going to be where Brian Robinson, who will play the early downs, is going to be able to really carve out the majority role. He's going to be on the field. He's going to stay on the field. He's better in the passing game than people give him credit for. And I think he's just going to absolutely dominate this backfield. Meanwhile, Austin Ekeler, we're getting reports out of camp that he's been running punt return drills. Like, no, give over.
This one hurts, I'll be honest. Nick Chubb, the running back, is one of my favorite players I have ever watched in NFL. It was amazing to see him in his hype. He was forever underrated. But this is a guy that is coming off MCL surgery in September, ACL surgery in November. This offense is moving into a more pass-heavy scheme. I think we're going to see this offense actually built around Deshaun Watson rather than the running game. And yet I'm having to pay running back 40 prices. I just can't get it. I think there is a better scenario where there is a more likely scenario where Nick Chubb doesn't play this year than Nick Chubb is a top 16 running back. Are you with me?
Yeah, and for a multitude of reasons, some you've mentioned, some I'll get into, but the multi-ligament, multi-surgery stuff, haven't we learned our lesson with J.K. Dobbins? Haven't we learned our lesson with Javonte Williams? Like, That's no small thing for any running back to come back from. And Nick Chubb is older than both of those running backs were. Yes, his injury was right at the start of the season, so he's had almost a full year. But I don't care. Like, how many times did those guys look just sluggish, look slow, look like they weren't able to trust themselves with it? Nick Chubb might be at a squat 585 pounds, but as Tyler's pointed out on a number of our best ball streams, that's one of the first movements that comes back post ACL. That's an easy one, the ones which you need to see, the cutting, the high speed stuff, the moving when you've got somebody try to tackle you, try to twist away from people. So you add that into the fact that it's a new offense, which is probably going to spread the ball out, spread the wide receivers around. And then you throw in that there is 4 running backs, including Nick Chubb there. Pierre Strong, who they traded for last year. Jerome Ford, who showed out reasonably well last year. And then Donta Foreman, who has a relationship with the running backs coach from their time in Carolina. So maybe one of those gets cut before the start of the season. Maybe 2 of those don't factor in. Maybe one of them just ends up being a special teams player. But Jerome Ford showed that he can absolutely run the ball well at times. And he might not be incredible in the passing game, but he's decent enough to keep players like Nick Chubb off the field at times. Chubb's coming off that horrific injury, but in 2022, his yards per attempt and yards after contact were also career lows. So we don't have to pretend that Nick Chubb's always been insanely good. There might have very well been a case that in 2023 regression just slowly kept creeping down on the back of 2022. And if you're telling me that I could spend a top 100, 110 pick on Nick Chubb, or I can go and look at a guy like Blake Corum, or even take a shot on the likes of Marshawn Lloyd, Trey Benson, Zach Charbonnet, some of these younger running backs who might have huge contingent value, that's where I'm going every day of the week.
Yeah, we're 3 weeks away from the NFL season starting, and Nick Chubb has only started working towards making cuts in the last 10 days. Like, there is no way that Nick Chubb, I can see him not going on PUP to start the season. And as you said, we know that these multi-ligament injuries take time to people get up to speed. Well, if he's not going to be training at full speed until the middle of the season, he's not going to be game ready until potentially playoff time. I just can't see a world where you can start Nick Chubb with any confidence in your leagues this year. So let somebody else take the headache. I don't want to be rostering a running back that I'm going to have to probably carry for 5-6 weeks. And even then, I don't think is going to be a reliable starter. Nick Chubb, phenomenal fantasy player, phenomenal player to watch. But sadly for this year, I'm not touching him. If you've made it this far and you've not hit that subscribe button, what are you doing? Hit subscribe. We are closing in on 3,000 subscribers. Get yourself entered in our giveaway. You will not regret it.